Welcome. I want to first of all thank the people behind the Accessibility Summer Club for giving me the opportunity to present this talk. And secondly, I want to thank you for caring enough about making the world a more accessible place and taking some time out of your day to learn more about this topic and spend some time with me. So who am I? My name is Schalk Neethling. I live in Pretoria, South Africa with my wife and three young adults. And we also share our home with 4 dogs, 3 cats, and as of last week, 2 new fish. So it's a busy home indeed. I have also spent the last year working at a German agency called Factorial with a wonderful bunch of people, and I would highly encourage you to go have a look at our website and see the amazing work that we all do. I'm also a little obsessed with technology, and I've been involved with this, and especially with front-end engineering, for about the last 15 years. And ever since I started, I was drawn to the whole idea of the open web, web accessibility, open web standards, and all of this. And so I've always found myself advocating for all of these topics. And the more I've learned about it, the more passionate I've become, the more I've seen the power of the web, the more I wanted to ensure that it's open and accessible to as many people as possible. I'm also active in the open source world, but especially over the last year or two, I've kind of been moving more towards the ethical open source side. And I have some thoughts about the broader open source ecosystem, but that's a completely separate talk, so I won't go into that for this one. Talking about that, let's start getting into this talk. So we are all only temporarily abled, and we will all at some point during our lives encounter an event or a scenario where we need some extra affordances, either temporarily or situationally. Why do I start with this statement? Because I believe that in our busy lives, we often forget this fact. When we think about accessibility, and perhaps specifically web accessibility, we often narrow in on a couple of disabilities, namely blindness, deafness, and people with fine motor skills. However, when we do this, we do these people and ourselves a disservice. For one thing, we place a rather large burden on this group of people. We also enforce a stigma that they are somehow different from everyone else, and when in fact they are more like us than they are different. Just like us, they want to make a meaningful contribution to this world. Feel appreciated, feel loved, be part of the conversation, part of a solution, not a burden or a problem that needs fixing. Also, we make the mistake of thinking that disability is always a permanent state, when in fact it can be a lot more fluid. There are, of course, permanent disabilities, but there are also temporary and situational disabilities. Or put another way, there are times when we all need either permanent, temporary, or situational affordances. You might be starting to pick up on a theme here. I'm broadening the circle of who can do with a little extra help or care. This is not coincidental and reflects a real-world example many of you here might already be familiar with. In the early 70s, fed up with being halted in their tracks each time they encountered a curb, Michael Pachovas, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and a few friends wheeled themselves to one of these curbs in Berkeley, California, poured a crude ramp using cement, and started a revolution. They also cemented, pun intended, one of the most commonly used analogies in the accessibility world, the curb cut effect. This seemingly simple, mostly everyday affordance is such a great example of how we all benefit from something once thought to be put in place for a small, specific group of people. For those who have permanent mobility challenges, the curb cut affords them the freedom to get around without relying on the assistance of a good Samaritan or having to ask a friend or family member to accompany them on every trip, making them feel like a burden to others. At the same time, if you've been in an accident or had an operation and find yourself temporarily in a wheelchair, you too will be liberated by this innovation. Pushing a stroller, need to deliver some heavy packages and you're pushing a dolly, heading to your hotel room, and rolling that heavy suitcase around with you, well, aren't you glad the curb cut exists? But we also need to be on the lookout for what is termed accessibility theater. For example, for the longest time, many sighted people, including myself, would have been forgiven for assuming that ATM machines were made accessible because, after all, there's Braille on these ATMs. I've always wondered what these inscriptions say. And I listened to a podcast on Science Friday, and I learned that actually it turns out that for most of these, it just said that should you need assistance, please ask inside the bank. Not so great. And from the same podcast, I want to read a quick quote from Joshua Mile, who is also the person from which I learned about this whole ATM thing. And I think it's really apt to the story that I'm about to tell you after this. So he said, I really want to be part of encouraging people who have disabilities to think more deeply about the technology that they use, the rights that we have, the way that we interact in the world, and the opportunities that we all have. And the technology either allows us to have or gets in the way of having. This last part is really key to me. That we all have, and that technology either allows us to have or gets in the way of having. So not so long ago, I had an experience that demonstrated even in 2025 with AI and machine learning, LLMs, and all the technologies that surrounds us, we still fail many people, and we simply must do better. So my daughter had to apply for an identity document. And to do so, we had to head off to one of the bank branches. It's roughly 40 minutes drive from where we live. And as it turned out, often in these situations, the scheduled appointment time was more of a theory than a reality. And so, we settled down and we found our chairs. And while they were rather comfortable chairs, they were low slung. And so for some people, already here was the first challenge. You didn't really have the option of this chair or maybe one of the other chairs, other type of chair. There's one for everybody, and it's not really suited for everybody. But across from us sat an elderly couple, the husband in visible discomfort and the strain evident. Between them lay a set of crutches. It's a poignant reminder of the difficulties he is facing. I assume the prolonged wait exacerbated both his stress and the pain, as there seems to be a bit of tension between the two. After about an hour, their turn finally arrived, and steadying himself with great effort, the gentleman tentatively made his way to the counter, his wife support aiding him with each arduous step. Cramped quarters offered little respite, and he carefully lowered himself into a utilitarian plastic chair. Mere minutes later, he had to bravely rose once more and with great difficulty navigate to the photo booth. As he got up, he almost lost his footing, but thankfully some bystanders were there to assist him and his wife and could assist him to the photo booth and then back again safely. Upon his return, he needed to make a signature on a little tablet, but he didn't want to go through the whole painful discomfort of having to sit down and then only to get up a couple of minutes later. So he just decided to stand and uncomfortably make his signature. At last they were done, and we watched as visible relief washed over the couple's faces after this enduring and unnecessary burdensome process. Their palpable emotions spoke volumes about the barriers they had valiantly yet avoidably surmounted. While this was taking place, there was a mother with a baby waiting in line. The baby was clearly tired and was having none of this. I dreaded to think how she's going to struggle to navigate the application process with a demanding baby, whether or not she had a stroller to rest said baby in. My question is this not something technology and the web is supposed to have solved or alleviated to some extent? There should be no need for this person to make their way to a bank in a shopping mall wait for more than an hour, and then be asked to walk back and forth to renew or apply for a new identity card. I mean, with a web browser, an internet connection, a decent webcam, this person could have done everything, including the digital signature, from the comfort of their home. This experience struck me because it clearly demonstrates an instance of temporary disability. It clearly demonstrates an instance where someone needed situational affordances, i.e. the mother with the baby, how technology can improve people's lives, and how a little forethought and thinking beyond our immediate circumstances can guide us in designing better processes and better technology solutions. I mean, how many of us have woken up in the morning or gone to bed the day before an appointment with a splitting headache, an upset stomach, or generally feeling unwell and wish there was another way? A way to not have to reschedule the appointment, a way to accomplish a task in a way that can more easily fit into our lives. As the father of 2 daughters and a husband, I know full well that there are times in the month where the last thing they want to do is stand or wait in a queue. I also know that Mother Nature does not care about your appointment time and appointment date, and does not always keep to a strict schedule. And so there has been occasion where we've had to reschedule appointments. As we all know, rescheduling itself can often be a daunting task. If you add time sensitivity to the outcome of the appointment, say a visa application, passport application, or something similar, this can cause a lot of stress that nobody needs. With that said, I will be amiss if I do not acknowledge yet another barrier to access here. While many of us have access to the web in a country such as South Africa, where I live, and the greater global south, access to the web is still not equally distributed. And this holds true for many other areas in the world, even in some so-called first world countries. So while the above story paints a picture where the web can enable us all, we still have work to do on the infrastructure level. Or the most accessible web pages and applications in the world will not help these people. But ensuring the web is accessible is a perfect place to start, so that when these people do get access, they do not face yet another barrier. This is a massive undertaking, and it can feel daunting at times. And we're allowed to let ourselves feel the immensity, feel the overwhelm, and ask for support. But then we must stand up and continue to work together. Also, your contribution is not only meaningful when it changes the world. Often we do not even know how something small we did today made someone else's life a little easier, a little better, a little happier. And to that end, I want to do my bit and share a couple of common web accessibility problems that seem to persist, because I hope that you all are not only consumers, but also makers of the web. And I want to share with you how you can spot, avoid, and fix some of these common web accessibility barriers. So let's dive in. So once a year for the last 7 years running, WebAIM has been doing this analysis of the top 1 million websites' homepages. And what they get out of this analysis basically gives us a pretty good idea of the state of web accessibility on the internet. And then they also present some specific information concerning the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. And what I want to look at here is the top 6 failures that's been encountered on these pages. And as mentioned, these are probably going to be familiar to a lot of people. Low contrast text, missing alternative text for images, missing form input labels, empty links, empty buttons, and missing document language. So I'm going to demonstrate how you can find these and how we can solve these. But I'm also going to show some things with a screen reader. And on my Mac, I'm going to use VoiceOver, but then I'll also do some of the other tests using NVDA on Windows, using this great service called Assistive Labs. And then in addition to that, I'll also show you how some things can be especially challenging for people using voice control software. So let's jump into color contrast first. So this is basically checking that the foreground and background color has sufficient contrast so that people can easily read content. This is mostly about text, so it's mostly about the foreground and background, so the text color and the background color. So here I'm highlighting 4.5/1 for regular text and 3/1 for large text. This is basically your AA level, so your WCAG goes from A, AA, AAA, and as you go up, things are generally more accessible. This is also not a blanket statement that I like to make because there's nuance here again, but generally the higher up in the stack you go, the more accessible things are. So we'll see that for some of these, hitting AA is good, and that should be your baseline. But for a lot of these, it's actually not that hard to achieve AAA, and color contrast is usually one of these. Now let's have a look. So here's a web page that has a couple of accessibility problems. One of these is low contrast. Now, normally I would just do a full page scan using either IBM's accessibility checker or maybe Lighthouse that's built into Chromium-based browsers, or Firefox has also got accessibility tools, and one of the things it can check is color contrast. But for some unknown reason, I've run into this bug that I actually found on GitHub, where sometimes the browser just does not report on these things when you run a full page scan. But that might kind of be a blessing in disguise, so I'm just going to roll with it. And instead, I'm going to show you some other tools we can use that's a little bit more manual, but sometimes it's a good thing. So first of all, if I just look at the page, the items that jump out at me that could have contrast problems are the little icons here at the bottom, and then potentially this white icon on this like yellow goldish background. So we're going to focus in on those. In fact, I know these are the ones because I intentionally added them, so I'm cheating a little bit here. And then for these, let's use the browser, but I'm going to switch over to Firefox here, and I'm going to open up the DevTools, and I have the inspector here. And then if I right-click on one of these and I click on Inspect, it's going to highlight it in here for me. Now what I'm interested in is, so here's our anchor, and you can see here's our color. So that's the color here. And if I click on that, here we can see that it does not meet the WCAG standards for accessible text, and it's calculated against this background here, so white. So here we have a failure. And so if we check the others, of course, they're all going to fail with exactly the same one because they all use the same color. So we need to address this one. So another way you can choose, and now this tool is something that you can download. It's called the Color Contrast Analyzer, CCA. And this one, the nice thing about this one is you can use it outside the browser as well. So it's not something built into the browser, it's an external application. So even if you want to check contrast maybe in a Word document or maybe a PDF or in a Figma file or anything like that, you can use this one everywhere. And so this one looks something like this. And basically you will grab this background color and you grab the color picker, pick the color, and then here's your foreground color. You'll grab your picker, and again you will pick there. And now we can see that it's failing both AA and AAA. And this at the bottom here, this is for other UI components. So in this case, we fail there as well, but this is not something we're looking at specifically here. So with this, we can see that we need to address these guys, and we need to address this one. So if we go into the code, I can see here on button primary, it sets that white foreground color. So I'm just going to delete that and save this. And then let's go back. Now we have our black icon on this color. So let's go back to our color contrast analyzer. And now we're just going to check with this new color. And now we pass everything. Nice. So there we fixed that problem. Now we have these little ones down here. And I know that this dark blue color here definitely passes. And let's switch over to Firefox and we can double check here. So there we have our H2. So if we go in body, we have our color there. And here we can see it passes AAA. Like I said, it's not always that hard, especially with these, to pass even on AAA. So we have 15.51/1 here for our color contrast. So we know for a fact that if we make our little icon links here also this color, then we're probably going to be in good shape. So if we now go, so I have this variables file, and here I have the color link color, and here is the problematic color. But here is that primary one. So we're going to go ahead and use this one. So we're just going to reference it using a CSS custom property, and we're going to save. And now they've updated. So now if we go ahead and we inspect them again, so we're going to go up here, boop, and now we're passing with AAA. So as easy as that, it was, we were able to find our problems. Normally it's even easier if you can do a full page scan, but anyway. And just like that, we've now fixed our problem. So we've fixed our color contrast. Nice. So let's move on to the next one, which is missing alternative text for images. So I know that there's two images here. There's this hero image over here, and then there is this one of me holding up a peace sign over here. And both of them do not have alt text. We're going to approach this from two different scenarios. But first things first, I'm going to open up VoiceOver and just let it read the page so that you get an idea of what happens when you haven't specified any alt text. So let me do that.
You are /hero Jeremy Bishop on /aviv unlabeled image /avatar shock 300 aviv unlabeled image heading level 1 voiceover off.
So as you could hear there, what it's doing, because it doesn't have any alternative text, it's using the file name. And of course, to a screen reader user, this was completely meaningless. Maybe the fact that my name was in that, they can kind of think that it's probably a photo of me or something. So let's fix this, but we're going to do two different things. So this top image, it's not really necessary to convey what's in here to a screen reader user because it's decorative. It doesn't have any meaning. There's no text on here. If you didn't know about this image, the rest of the page would still totally make sense. So what we're going to do for this one is, if I go into the code here, and you can see that my code editor is screaming at me and saying, excellent, images must have alternative text. So for this one, we're going to give it an empty alt. So when you do that, you're essentially telling the screen reader, this is not interesting or relevant. So just skip over it. Just kind of ignore this one. But for this one, maybe it is you want to describe what's in this image. But now we want to be careful because we don't just want to write a basic description. Maybe we want to be a little bit more detailed. So maybe we'll say, so here we'll do alt, and then maybe we'll say, one thing to note here, don't start with image of blah, 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 because normally most screen readers will either at the end announce that it's an image, or it will start by saying image of da, 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 and then read whatever you've put in the alt. So if you here write image of, then you might run into a scenario where it says image of, image of. So just start with the descriptive part. For example, a middle-aged white male with a beard, slightly smiling, let's say holding up two fingers that symbolizes, I think, a peace sign. Something like that. That's a little more descriptive. We could also say, if we wanted to, we could also include maybe a middle-aged male with a beard. Maybe we could have said a pink shirt, but I think that's maybe less interesting. You could also describe what's in the background, but maybe that's also less interesting. So you want to be descriptive, but you don't want to be overly verbose. So now with those things fixed, like if we inspect this real quick, we can see we have our empty alt over here, and then if we inspect this one, we can see that we have our alt text here, right? So now let's start up VoiceOver again, and let's see what happens this time.
Profile of Schalk Neethling. You are main, a middle-aged reload. Profile of Schalk Neethling, open web main, a middle-aged white male with a beard, slightly smiling, Holding up two finger that symbolizes a peace sign. Image. Heading level 1.
So here you
A
can
middle-aged white male with a voiceover off.
So here you can see it's skipping over that first image because it has the empty alt and it's jumping right to that other one. And yes, I misspelled smiling, so it read it as smilling. So let me fix that. Okay, so with that we have fixed this. But with this one, I actually want to step back for a moment here, and let me just remove this alt text over here. And as you can see it there, it told me that there's a problem. But then also, if I go in here and I use this accessibility assessments tool from IBM and I run a scan, and then let's turn off these two so we only look at violations. Then let's quickly find it. SVG, the image has neither an accessible name nor is marked as decorative or redundant. So, and you can see that it's highlighting my image over here. So this is also a way where you can use browser tools. And by the way, this IBM Equal Access accessibility checker is free, and you can install it in Chrome, Edge, or in Firefox. You can also run another test that will give you similar results, which is Lighthouse, which comes by default with Chrome browsers. And for example, if you check here, navigation, desktop accessibility, we analyze our page load. There's going to be some accessibility failures here. And you will see here, image elements do not have alt text. And you can see it's highlighting that one. So let me quickly go ahead and then put this back. So now it's going to, let's just make sure it's refreshed. And let's rerun this one. So let's analyze our page again. And so this time we will see that one no longer, so as you can see, that one no longer pops up. So that is an easy way, and that's how the full scan for the color contrast would normally have worked as well. So that's how we can find where our images are that's missing alternative text, and then give it the appropriate alternative text, whether that be being descriptive or whether that is giving it an empty alt so that it's being ignored. There's another one. One of the areas where it's kind of important to not just describe what's in the image, but you might go a little broader, is, for example, if what the image is an animated GIF or GIF, depending on how you want to pronounce it, because oftentimes just saying what's in the image will describe what's maybe in the first frame, but the screen reader user will still not have a sense of what this GIF maybe suggests. Maybe when it's playing, it suggests a feeling of happiness or joy or being silly or whatever the case may be. So you might want to include information like that as well. Okay, moving on to the next one. So missing form input labels. And for that, we're going to have to click on this, which will open this one. Now, you might look at this and think, but there's no missing labels here. It's name, email, message. Also, they're pretty, how can I say, they're pretty simple in what they say. They don't tell you, is it your full name? Message is okay. That's probably okay. Email is probably also okay. But the first one could maybe do with full name or something like that. The other problem is what this is using is placeholder. So if we go into the HTML, I can show you where this is happening. Let me just find place. So here's the placeholder text. And so it says name, email, message. But there's a couple of problems here. Let me first of all open VoiceOver again, and then I'm going to step through these fields.
VoiceOver on. Name required, edit text. Email required, edit text email. Message required, edit text. Send message, button. Message required, edit text. Email required, edit text email. Name required, edit text. VoiceOver off.
So it tells you what the name is. It tells you that it's required. It tells you what is expected name. Email. It also tells you that it's an email field, and that is because I've marked it as type email. The thing is, depending on how much information is in this placeholder, maybe, for example, it shows you the format of a date, or it suggests the format of your email, for example. What happens here is for people with cognitive problems. As soon as you start typing, the placeholder goes away. So if I start typing my name, now the placeholder is gone. So if you now need to go back to, oh, what was the format again? You now have to delete everything. Of course, you can select all, cut, and then paste again. But again, why not just have it in a label that's always present, that doesn't disappear? Now, the other thing is, if you're using a label element like you should be, then don't also double it up with placeholder text unless the placeholder text is in addition to, but is not essential. Because otherwise you'll find that the screen reader will read both. And much like browsers, we're in a much better space now than we used to be, but there's quite a few differences between the different screen readers and what they will announce and how they will read stuff. So some will double up, others will only read one of the two. And so just to be safe, use a label and only put stuff in the placeholder that's supplemental. And maybe if you didn't hear that, it would be fine. If you start typing and it goes away, you wouldn't feel lost. So for example, let's restore our labels here. So we're going to remove the placeholder, and then we're going to restore our label here. And now our label says first name, because that's all that we want. And then here it's going to say your email address, just to be very clear. You can clean this one up. And here, instead of just message, we're going to say, how can I help you? And then we're going to save that. And now we're going to open this up. So now you can clearly see the labels here. The other upside is if you click here, it sets focus into the field. And that is because we've associated the label with the for attribute with the ID of the input element. So here again, the for attribute on the label with the ID attribute on the text area. And by doing that, we first of all give these inputs an accessible name. Secondly, we have this additional benefit where, and this is especially useful for radio buttons and checkboxes, where the hit area can be really small. But if you have also a label, then the hit area becomes the checkbox plus the entire label. So, and now let me go ahead and open up VoiceOver again.
VoiceOver on Chrome. First name, group. You dialog with 6 items. How can I send message? Buttons. How can I help you? Required. Edit text. Your email address. Required. Edit text email. First name. Required. Edit text. VoiceOver off.
So as you can hear, that is a lot better than what we had before and a lot better than placeholder, because when I type, the information is still present. It doesn't go away. The other little small detail here is because all these fields are required, I've just added it here. Enter your details or fields are required. Instead, you will often see people put a little asterisk here, and then somewhere else on this page, it'll be another asterisk that says this field is required. But oftentimes there's no link between the two. So maybe what will happen is the screen reader will say something like first name asterisk. But then you wouldn't know what asterisk means. You might, because you've used the web a bunch of times, you might know that, oh, this probably means that this field is required. Because for me, all these fields are required. I'm just stating it in plain text. So whether you're using a screen reader or whether you're just looking at this, you can see that all these fields are required. Okay, so that takes care of missing form input labels. So there's really no reason for you to have these not be present. So now we fix those issues as well. Let's move on to the next one. Empty links. So one might be thinking like, whenever will a link be empty? Well, technically these links at the bottom are empty. So let me open up again VoiceOver, and then I'll tab onto those links, and let's see what the screen reader reads out.
VoiceOver on a link, comma, Schalk Neethling, list 4 items. Link, a middle-aged white male with link, comma, Schalk Neeth profile link, comma, at Schalk Neethling link, content list. Link, comma, at Schalk Neethling link, comma, Schalk Neethling. VoiceOver off.
Okay. So what's happening here is the screen reader is trying its best to give the user some information about this. But for example, it only read my name for all of these. And so you wouldn't know that it's GitHub, Mastodon, LinkedIn, YouTube, for example. And if we look at the HTML, I can show you what it's trying to do here. You can again see that here Axelinter is telling me that links must have discernible text. And so if we look at it here, you can see here, so it's pulling these little bits off from out of the URL. It's actually being really clever when it's doing that every time, and it's reading that out to the screen reader user. But why put the onus on the screen reader to figure this out? Also, that's what VoiceOver does. We don't know what JAWS will do. We don't know what NVDA will do. We're not sure what it will do on iOS. We're not sure what it will do on Android. So we can do this, for example. We can say, this is a common technique called visually hidden, which means we're hiding this text for everybody except screen reader users. So it's visually hidden. So what this now does is now we can see here and we can see GitHub. So again, I'm not hiding everything. I'm just hiding the collaborate with me on part. And I'll show you why I'm keeping that part. So I'm just going to restore everything here real quick. So now we have these, right? So we have all these. And let me turn on the screen reader again. And now we'll again tab over these and let's see what happens this time.
Profile. Entering link. Collaborate with profile of Schalk Neethling. Join the conversation on Mastodon. Link. Collaborate with me on GitHub. Link. Join the link. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Link. Learn with me on YouTube. VoiceOver off.
So that is much clearer. Now the user knows where the link is going and they can decide they do want to follow it because they do want to learn with me on YouTube. They want to join the conversation on Mastodon, whatever the case may be. Now, why? Of course, you could move, for example, this YouTube part into our visually hidden, and we only have our icon now. But let me show you why I keep that. And this is a design decision that some people will go for and other people will not do. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up the voice control. Now, three things to note here. First of all, if I just say GitHub, it's not going to work because what voice control on Mac OS is looking for is the exact sentence. So for that to work, I will have to say collaborate with me on GitHub. So that is cryptic because the voice control user, of course, has no way of knowing unless they're inspecting the code here to see what is the actual sentence, because I'm saying GitHub, but it doesn't work. But I will show you that there's another way that people with voice control can get to these elements, even if they don't know what exactly the text is. So I'm going to do three things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to use my knowledge of what the text actually says to show you how you would click on that first link. Then I will show you how we can use what is called a grid to also click these elements, but I'll show you how keeping this additional text, almost like the benefit we have with a form input label as opposed to no form input label, we have that bigger hit area, how that is beneficial when a voice control user needs to use the grid. Click collaborate with me on GitHub. So as you saw there, it clicked that link. And that is because I said the whole sentence and because I cheated a little bit. Okay, now if I say click GitHub, nothing's happening because it doesn't know, it can't find just the word GitHub to click. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to instruct the voice control what to do. Show grid. Show grid. 40. 10. Click 12. And there we go. Now I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to try and click on the LinkedIn one. Show grid. 41, 10. Click 8. Lucky. This time it worked. What you'll often find is that you need at least one more step to get there. This time we were lucky and that we could get there, and having this bigger hit error didn't help us out that much. But you can see what a voice control user needs to do in order to get to these little icons, because what the text is missing. So be careful when hiding stuff and only showing a portion of it, because this might make it more difficult for people using voice control. Okay, let me quit voice control. Okay, so that's empty links. So empty buttons is pretty much the same thing, and we have that here. So if we, for example, inspect this, and we click on the button, and over here we click on accessibility, then here, if we look here, there's no title, no contents, no form label, nothing. This has no label. A person doesn't know what does this button do. So this is an example of an empty button. So again, what we're going to do over here is let's find our button. Where is it? Here we go. So, and I'm going to restore that. So now it says get in touch. So I'm going to inspect that. So now if we look, we can see the contents is get in touch. So now if we open up again, if we open up our screen reader.
Voiceover on group. A middle-aged white entering profile of Schalk Neethling. Leaving toolbar I visited. Profile of Schalk. Get in touch. Button. Group. Art dialog with 3 items. Close. Get in touch. First name. Required. Edit. Close dialog. Button. Group. Get in touch. Button. Group. Art. Voiceover off.
So now it's clear that this button has something to do with get in touch. When you activate it, it opens a modal. It tells you that there's a modal and that there's a form in here with 3 fields. It also tells you that there is a button with closed dialog. So this is clear to the screen reader user what these different elements do and what exists on the page. So this is how we can find and then fix our empty buttons. Okay, so let's move on. There's one more here, but before we dive in here, I want to tell you something about links. You might have often seen this, click here, visit website, click here. And oftentimes people don't quite understand what the exact problem is, because if you read the sentence that's before it, it ends with see the IPCC's latest assessment report, click here. Or visit the Climate Justice Alliance website, visit website, check out Project Drawdown Solutions Library, click here. So, in the context, it totally makes sense. But one of the ways that people use these screen readers is to easily jump between sections. And one way they do that is landmarks. Another one is headings. And another one is just links. But not just jumping by pressing tab, jumping from link to link, but also with VoiceOver, there's this thing called a rotor. And so when you open that up, you can say, just show me all the links that's on this page, right? So if we open this up and we do that, let's see what we get. So of course, we now have no context over all of the content here, right? We don't know all the sentences.
VoiceOver on Chrome. Links menu. Click here. Visit website. Click here.
So that is why it's problematic when you do that. And in this case, it's a very easy fix.
Link. Click here. VoiceOver off.
So if we go into that relevant page here, and then instead of linking this link here, for example, what we'll do is remove this, and then we will do that. And again here. We'll link that up. And the last one, let's delete that. Check out, boom, like that. So now if we go back and we open up our tool and then open up our rotor.
VoiceOver on toolbar links menu. Visit the Climate Justice Alliance's website. See the IPCC's latest assessment report. Check out Project Drawdown's Solutions Library. Why I Care.
So this is clearly
VoiceOver
a
off.
lot better. And now even without knowing the entire context, you can quickly find the links and see and immediately hear the one that you're interested in and just press enter on the keyboard and go there directly. So this is why it's important. This is why people often say don't use the text, click here or visit website or read more. Try and link something that actually tells you where this link is going. Okay, one more, missing document language. This is an interesting one. So if we, for example, look at this page here and we open up our dev tools and we go to our accessibility assessment and we scan it, here, page detected as HTML but does not have a lang attribute. Now, the lang attribute it refers to is if we go into this one and we have a look, we'll see here again that Axel Inter is saying, hey, HTML elements must have a lang attribute. And so the reason for that is it tells the screen reader what the language or the main language of this page is, and that allows the screen reader to switch to the appropriate dictionary or the appropriate pronunciation tool under the hood so that it actually pronounces the words properly. Because if it doesn't, you will hear what can happen then. Now, also, this is in English, but it doesn't have a lang attribute. Now, because my default setting on my computer is English, it'll just use that. And in this case, everything will be fine and there will be no problem because it will read it like English. So I'm not going to demo that one, but but for those reasons, you want to set this to lang en here. Because if my first language or my default setting on my computer was not English, and it was, for example, French, because that lang attribute is missed there, some screen readers, again, would interpret the text and say, oh, wait a minute, this isn't French, and it might detect that it's English and then switch appropriately. But again, you're not guaranteed that this will happen. And if it doesn't happen, it's going to try and read the English with a French, kind of a French pronunciation, and things are going to sound really strange. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to show you this page. So here everything is in French, and so, but if we go to index.fr, we're not telling the browser that. In the screen reader as such, because the browser exposes this accessibility information to the operating system. And so the screen reader can then get at that information via the operating system, called the accessibility tree. And so, and now if we go into, so I'm going to use Assistive Labs for this. And in order for this to work, I need to start this thing called an assistive tunnel, which is just basically allows me to access my local computer through this. So I'm going to go ahead here, and here I'm going to use Chrome on Windows with NVDA, and it's going to assume that I am English. Now it's going to be presented with a web page that's actually in French, but it's going to try and read it as English.
Inspired by nature, artists collect. Welcome. NVDA speech viewer. Heading level 1 enter. HTTP 120. Translate this page. Alert, this dialog is dans la lueur de la fresque colorie, du homs et tina in su le passage souterrain, tabliers. Nos otter de la taille, lava pure s élevant de la grande marmite en argent devant yeux.
So as you can hear, that is clearly not what we were expecting. So now let's go back into this page, and this time we're going to go ahead and actually tell the browser, hey, this is actually French. And so we're going to go back into exactly the same setup, but this time we're telling the browser that, hey, this page we're going to now that you're getting here is actually in French.
Google Chrome. NVDA Speech Viewer. Welcome, assistant, HTTP 120, translate this page.
Dans la lueur de la fresque colorée, deux hommes se tenaient sous le passage souterrain, tablier. Noués autour de la taille, la vapeur s'élevant de la grande marmite en argent devant eux. Là,
I think you can agree that that is much, much better. So a small little thing like that can make such a big difference for somebody using a screen reader. Now, what if you have a mix? What if you have English and then some French? Well, in those cases, we kind of look at what is the main page language, right? So maybe in this case, we're saying our main page language is English, but then over here, these two elements over here is actually in French. Now you couldn't put a container around them, so you don't have to do this individually, but for now I'll just do it like this. And so you set them to FR. So you're saying, generally this is English, but these two passages over here, they're in French. So if we now go and we're going to use this one.
Google, welcome, NVDA Speech Viewer. Welcome, HT 120, translate this page. These men were not strangers to this place. Every into a haven, lighting up with recognition. Week gone by, quiet walls. It wasn't just a place for food, it was a place where a sense of community blossomed, where isolation was pushed back by simple acts of care. Heading level 2.
et maintenant en français. Ces hommes connaissaient bien ce lieu. Chaque semaine, ils transformaient ce coin autrefois oublié.
And just like that, it switches that engine out and we're getting beautiful, proper pronunciation of the two different languages. So as you can see, a small little thing like that can make a massive difference to how somebody experiences the web. And with that, we've covered these 6 ones. There was a lot here, but when you actually look at them individually, it's small little things that each and every one of us can do to make the web just a little better. And it's really easy to avoid these. More often than not with accessibility things on the web, it's much, much easier to bake this in than to go retroactively and try and fix these problems. Often that's harder, is more expensive, and takes a lot more time. So just thinking about these things up front and fixing them, we can actually have a much more accessible web, and you don't actually have to go out of your way. And as mentioned in the beginning, you never know when you will need to use a screen reader. For whatever reason, you might have had an operation on your eyes and your eyes are both shut and you can't see and you still want to read stuff. And now all of a sudden, maybe this poetry is being read all weird because nobody mentioned that it's actually in French or in Spanish or in English. And your enjoyment of all of this just goes down. So in conclusion, I want to thank you for, again, this has probably been a pretty long one, but I hope you found this helpful. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My email address is on the slides. It is also in the Markdown document. In the Markdown document that will also be shared with all of you, there's links to a bunch of the tools and things and additional reading that I've linked in there. And please feel free to reach out to me. Follow me on all the social things. I'm on Mastodon, LinkedIn, Blue Sky. Those are the 3 that I use at the moment. And yeah, it's going to take a community of people that don't keep quiet, a community of people that writes the article, shares the article, educates, join the protest, and does the work and learns what needs to be learned to do these things right. Because recent events in the world has also taught us that we can't rely on institutions or governments or corporations to help us here. More often than not, they're going to let us down. So it's up to each one of us to stand together and make the web more accessible. Because as in the words of Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. And just in the closing, if you've wondered why I've used this Comic Sans font in a lot of places here, again, this is a link. Go and have a read. Actually turns out that Comic Sans is helps people with dyslexia to much easier read content because of the way it's designed. It's not the only font, there's other ones too. Please go have a read. It's a really interesting read. And thank you so much. And again, reach out if you have any questions. I look forward to hearing from you and learning how you have made the web a little more accessible. Thank you.